Now we will convene the Eastmark CFD number 2 board meeting. Again, board member Spilsbury is unable to attend and is excused. All other board members are present. Ms. Mosley, do we have any blue cards from citizens for this meeting?
Not under item 1.
Okay, thank you. Item 2 is approval of minutes from a prior meeting. Is there a motion to approve? Thank you, Mr. Summers and Mr. Heredia. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Thank you. That passes unanimously. Item 3A is to conduct a public hearing on the feasibility report for a proposed project to be financed by the issuance of general obligation bonds. I declare the public hearing open. Ms. Mosley, do we have any requests to speak from the public on this item?
We do, Mayor. We have Travis Miller, who has called in, and he is on the line, so whenever you're ready.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Miller, can you hear us?
We'll see if it works, because I did get a message from upstairs that number wasn't working, but he did get in through it. So if it doesn't work for him, then we have another number for him to call. But
okay.
You unmuted him? And I've been texting
Mr.
him.
Miller, on your end, can you make sure that you...
I think we heard him.
He's right here.
He's here?
He's in here.
Oh, he's... Oh.
Yes,
Well.
we can hear you through the computer.
I signed into the Zoom.
All right, Mr. Miller, hold on. We can't. We're trying to get a
Hold on
microphone
just a minute,
over here.
Travis. We're trying to get you, increase your
Not a worry
volume.
at all, thank you.
Can you increase that volume anymore?
We could probably dial in through the
Is that
phone
good?
as well. My wife Monica here is here as well. Both of us had submitted individual comments.
Okay, Mr. Miller, we can hear you now. You have 3 minutes. Please proceed.
Here, I'll turn it to my wife who wrote the comment on the CFD.
Hi, for the agenda item, it's difficult to see what the certain infrastructure is for the public. Is this for the approval of CFD monies for the disc golf course and the Eastmark skate park?
I'm
Hello?
sorry. Yeah,
She
please,
asked
you
if
have. I heard the question, but go ahead. You have 3 minutes to say whatever you'd like to say.
Sure, I just wanted to make sure I was speaking to the right point. Essentially, the CFD should not pay Brookfield for the Eastmark disc golf course or skate park. Brookfield should not receive CFD monies for interest in land that it did not own or have the ability to dedicate to the city. The assets, the disc golf course and the skate park, are owned by the Eastmark Community Alliance, which is the Eastmark Homeowners Association, and they were owned by the Alliance prior to the implementation of the Fifth Amendment to the PATA. Pursuant to ARS 48715, this infrastructure does not qualify as a construction project, as the CFD board did not cause a feasibility study prior to commencement of construction. And the reason the board didn't cause a study is because this was planned and zoned, constructed and deeded to the Eastmark Community Alliance as a private amenity, and was never intended to be part of the Great Park. And it's certainly not better than what the city could have provided on its own. As such, this project can only be approved as an acquisition. The CFD cannot acquire land from Brookfield that Brookfield does not own. And that is why the ECA had to sign for a public easement. I can say that Christina Christian, who signed that easement, acted outside the scope of her authority by executing an easement on ECA property. In reviewing the ECA, or the Eastmark Community Alliance meeting minutes, there was never a vote to give away real interest in ECA land or to execute an easement on the property. Furthermore, such actions would violate the Eastmark CC&Rs that stipulate nothing contained in this community declaration shall be deemed to be a gift or dedication of any portion of the community to the general public, for the general public, or for any public use whatsoever, and that the ECA shall take reasonable action to exercise its right to restrict any public dedication. Lastly, the Eastmark Community Facilities District disclosure that is legally mandated discloses to all residents in the CFD how the CFD works. It states that public infrastructure will be dedicated to the city upon acquisition or construction of public infrastructure by the CFD. The city will maintain and operate such improvements. Because the Fifth Amendment to the PATA states that the city will not maintain or operate the skate park or disc golf course, this infrastructure is not eligible for CFD financing pursuant to the CFD disclosure.
Ms. Miller, your time is
Yes.
up, so could you please just kind of summarize and wrap it up for us?
Yeah, that's essentially it. It's just that it makes no sense to pay Brookfield for acquisition or interest in real property that Brookfield was not able to dedicate or give to the city because it was already owned by the Eastmark Community Alliance, which is the Eastmark Homeowners Association.
All right, thank you very much, Mrs. Miller. Any other requests to speak from the public on this, Holly?
No further requests.
All right, thank you. Do any board members wish to address these items? I'm going to have you address I think the issues that Ms. Miller addressed in her testimony now are essentially the same items that she addressed in the blue cards that she submitted for the next agenda item. So I'm going to ask staff to respond. Ms. Miller, if you're still listening, we're not ignoring your questions. We're going to address them in the next agenda item. All right, so I declare the public hearing closed. Item 4A is the resolution approving the notice of hearing and the feasibility report and authorizing the issuance of the general obligation bonds and approving the form and authorizing the execution and delivery of various related documents and taking other actions related to the bonds. Prior to entertaining a motion on this, Mr. Smith, I know you heard the comments from Mrs. Miller a moment ago, and I've read her Holly, Ms. Miller submitted 2 blue cards that have been passed to the council on this agenda item. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. And I think her testimony was identical to what she was saying on the blue card. So can you address the issues that she's raised?
Yeah, Chairman and Board. And while I do that, maybe I'll also ask Mike Kennington and Zach Zakis. Zach is special counsel to the board and to the CFD to come up, and I'll try to answer the questions, but if I miss something, they can add to it.
Is the developer's representative here who could address the questions as well?
I don't know. Maybe I'll start to address the questions. And regarding the ownership issue, that was the first topic. The city and the CFDs have a legal opinion from the law firm of Snell and Wilmer, and I'll read a sentence out of it. It says, the execution and delivery and the performance of each of the easements agreements have been duly authorized by all necessary corporate action on the part of the Alliance. They did a separate analysis for the CFDs and for the city. And so a separate law firm, Snell and Wilmer, on their letterhead provided that legal opinion from the firm. Additionally, I'll just point out a couple other points. The Fifth Amendment, and just for the people that haven't kept track of this over the many months, a lot of these issues were raised at the Fifth Amendment, which occurred on December 8th at that council meeting. And so, there was a more robust discussion, I think, then too, of several of these topics. The Fifth Amendment includes a consent and assumption of obligations. The Community Alliance signed that consent and assumption of the Fifth Amendment. That assumption includes the easements. So they have already agreed to the assumption of the easements separately from that. The Fifth Amendment also includes representation, warranty, and indemnity from the developer that they have the authority to grant those easements. And I'll also point out that the deeds of the property to the Alliance include a statement within it which retains the power for the developer to grant the easement separate from the Alliance. So there's multiple ways in which the easements can be granted. But I'll also just go back to an independent law firm has done the analysis and has found that the Alliance did duly authorize the easements. Regarding the comment and the citation to the statute on construction and acquisition as far as the CFD, there's 2 ways that CFDs fund projects. One is they can do a construction funding, which is sort of upfront funding of a project before the project's actually built, or it can be acquisition at the end. We've always done acquisition funding. The project's done, we know the exact numbers, we are funding at the end. So the comment that, the comment regarding that the process wasn't followed for construction funding for the project, it's not a construction-funded project through the CFD, it's an acquisition-funded. I think there were some other comments regarding their own CC&Rs and HOA issues. I think some of those issues are best dealt with their own HOA. And regarding the disclosure, I think the last comment that they made, that's a standard disclosure form that is provided by the developer to people buying within, and I think that's what they're referencing regarding the maintenance obligation. The Fifth Amendment, which she was well aware of, clearly indicated where the maintenance obligations were going. And just, you know, there's been other agreements, both in development agreements and maintenance agreements that the city's entered into regarding maintenance obligations and sort of the repayment of maintenance. So that was a standard disclosure form that she's citing from. And so I think that was all her questions, so I'm not sure.
Can I just quickly mention the reason, how did we get here, right? Part of this is the city's negotiating, right? We're negotiating to make available this space for not just Eastmark, but for the public space. And so this is there's a lot of exchanges going here to kind of reconcile the original agreements. This is why there's 5 amendments, right? We're moving and changing, and the city was trying to make sure that it was looking after the interests of the overall public interest. And so, yes, we did negotiate these so that it would be, these parks that were being developed around Eastmark could be available to the general public. And then in the end, we end up also getting how many acres? 16 acres of public park in this area, also a little further east of this location. So this is a legal, conversation, but at the end of the day, let me just say, the city of Mesa is actually very much endorsing this concept because it has provided additional park area for all the citizens of Mesa, not just those who live in Eastmark.
Mr. Summers.
Now I know why Julie complains about that button. But, so, remind me, the developer was supposed to designate 90 acres toward a park, and then the city was afforded the opportunity to purchase 16 acres. So that would be the 106 acres for the park. Okay. So I think the concern that Ms. Miller has is that the skate park and the disc golf course were originally for the benefit of the community, right? They were part of the HOA's own park to be maintained by the park, and then somehow that acreage for those two, and how much acreage is that? It's about 3 for the skate park and
You know what it is?
18.
It's 8.73,
Okay.
the skate park and the,
But those the developer put together for the use and the benefit of the community. The community was going to maintain them, it was built that way. But then somehow this gets rolled in a development agreement to be part of the great park, to be utilized by the community as part of the greater park, but the maintenance of that stayed. And I think that's what's the sticking point in that. And Jim, you mentioned that we've done this before where public property the public and the private sector have worked together in maintenance. I don't know how to frame this, I'm sorry. But there have been public-private agreements where maintenance was maintained by the private entity, but there were public accesses to those structures, like downtown.
Well, I mean, there's a number of sort of complex different easements that the city has done. So the idea that
So this isn't new.
there's different variations
Okay.
of different sort of complex easements that the city has done or licensing.
So that part of the agreement, I can understand, but you could see where people were expecting that this was going to be a community asset, and then it's rolled into a public asset, and in order to help meet the obligations of the developer who was supposed to provide 90 acres. Were it not for this agreement, the developer would be short in the acres for the park, correct? You don't think so?
Councilman Summers, Eric Toon with Brookfield Properties. No, it would not preclude us from having the ability to do the 90 acres. Just for a point of clarification, the disc golf and skate park were originally intended to be public park, part of the Great Park. Through conversations early on, we bid the projects through the Title 34 requirements to meet the CFD obligations. And then when negotiating with the City Parks Department, it was clear that the city didn't want to take on those obligations at that time. And so we continued forward with building the projects, keeping them under the association's purview or the alliance's purview. And then when we started negotiations on the Fifth Amendment, the conversations were, it probably makes sense to make these public assets because there isn't a skate park in this part of the valley that is part of the city of Mesa. There isn't a disc golf course in this part of the valley that is part of Mesa. And so we proceeded with the negotiations with the city on that.
And so, Eric, instead of the city having to purchase this property.
Correct, it's dedicated.
It was dedicated. So for the city, initially, we probably weren't really excited about it, but when the idea came in the negotiations, both sides had to give a little bit, and our part was that we were now gonna get parks that we weren't gonna have to pay for. And so that land came to us, and that became a better option than having to pay for the land for parks.
Yeah, I definitely see the benefit. First of all, I'm really proud of what you've done with the parks. I mean, you heard me early today. I'm critical of some areas that have been developed. It's not the park. The park has done a very good job. Were it not for the CFD, these things would not have been installed. I will agree with you. I like the idea that it becomes a public park, but what benefit was rolled back into the community then if this ceases, these two items cease to be a community benefit and then become a city benefit? Was there any reparation made to the community itself? Because we're about to tax the community for this, or how do we justify that?
So they were never considered private amenities that were specific to the Eastmark community. They were always considered what we would call semi-public. So not able to be blocked off by key card access or something to where only residents could access it. And so the intent has always been that they would be open to all the general public within the city of Mesa. They were never intended to be specific to the Eastmark development.
Okay. And if we had turned this land over to the city to Mr. Brady, how would we have had to finance improvements here?
We'd have to pay for it, right? It's
Well,
not-
yeah, but how
When they
would we-
turn it over to the city, I mean, all of that land, even though the additional land we got for free.
So we would have
part
had
of
to have
negotiation.
bonded for it.
Cash, bonds, yeah, all those
Something.
options. So that's why the council approved this back in December, is because certainly there were some ideas, these were existing facilities, but at the same time, they became clearly public, general public across the city, and so people would know that. And we could then post it on our websites as part of the city park, but it also allowed us to say, now we don't have to go purchase this additional acreage or even build out the 16 acres, am I getting that number right? So we felt like it was a good way to kind of wrap up the whole conclusion of the Great Park and the development, where the city's interest, we felt like were being addressed and we were avoiding having to acquire the property separately.
Yeah, okay. You know, the park has really turned out very well. It's just, I think part of the policy process can be messy here. And were it not for the CFD, we wouldn't have the fishing pond in section 4 or phase 4. We wouldn't have a lot of the amenities here. I hate to look at Alicia, the council member Goforth, but I mean, one of the areas I thought about when we did this was Red Mountain Park and the lack of amenities. It's taken decades, to get anything done here, and to have a park this complete in this short a time is key. My only concern is that I'm concerned that Brookfield has met all the agreements that we had when we started this process, that the acreage that you have designated meets the agreement. And I know that that agreement has changed several times since I left and came back. So we you know that there is an audit that we're going to be doing. The city auditor here by any chance? I know he was thinking about it, doesn't matter. But the city auditor will be looking at this agreement, and I think there are questions that were posed by Ms. Miller that frankly they're valid questions that need to be answered. And I know Jim's office will help with those, but we're going to have to investigate to make sure that we are meeting each other's obligations, because I'm a little concerned with this. But I am happy with the park amenities.
Yeah, Council, just for the sake of those listening, I just want to repeat the numbers for the skate park and also for the disc golf. I think there was a question, but just for clarity, the skate park is 3.4 acres and the disc golf is 21.52 acres.
So again, I'll just say this. Eric and his representatives with the city met, and we felt like this was a very good outcome for the city of Mesa, right? That we end up acquiring or receiving all of these as public assets and additional another 16 acres of developed park that otherwise we would have to have purchased. And so, we've kind of been doing a lot of trading back and forth for fire station land and library land. So yes, the project that we developed 2 decades ago, yeah, it changed. But at the end of the day, and I'm not going to weigh on, how much a CFD costs, whether we should do CFDs. There's only 2, in our district, whether but this is how we get these amenitized amenities. So when people talk about, well, what is the benefit of a CFD? Well, you've got an amazing park, you've got a disc golf court, you've got a disc golf course, you've got a skate park, you've got a great lake, you've got ballparks. Can every neighborhood say they have those? No. So it's a big lift to be able to get all this here. And so yes, they're paying a premium for it, but they have the closest access to all of these amazing amenities that a lot of our other residents have to actually get in their car and drive to. So we felt like at least what we brought back in December that the council approved was a very good deal for the city at the end of the day. At least just looking at it from the city's perspective, right? We didn't necessarily say concern about how much longer the CFD would have to be in place to pay those off, but that was kind of part of the amenity. We looked at it from the city's perspective of the obligations that both the developer had as well as our ability to continue to build out the great park. So that's where we ended up with.
And Chris, just remind me, because I think I know, but as part of the original agreement before all the amendments were made, the original agreement is that there would be bonds issued and then there would be a small maintenance fee as part of the assessment for ongoing maintenance of infrastructure above and beyond what Mesa would typically install. Is that correct? Or maybe Mike is the best.
Yeah, so the original agreement had a target tax rate for paying off the GO bonds, but also had a 30-cent maintenance. And that currently is used to pay for the administration of the CFD. If ever we get to a point where we have more tax revenue than what it costs to administer, then it could go towards maintenance.
Okay, and that was for above and beyond the typical, so that was part of the original agreement too?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought I remembered. I'll let somebody else speak.
Chairman, Board, just in further response, Zach Sakis, I'm special counsel to the district, so work on behalf of the district. Just want to make sure, when you said the agreement, because the prior discussion regarding the Fifth Amendment to the pre-annexation development agreement, the CFD is not a party to that, but that is between the city and the developer in connection with the overall development of the Eastmark project. There are maintenance obligations in that agreement, and then back to the scope of this board, the development financing participation waiver and intergovernmental agreement, as Mike correctly described, there are operation and maintenance obligations in that as well. So just wanted to make sure we were responding to your question.
Yeah, it wasn't I apologize, it wasn't a well-articulated question because I'm familiar with some of the earlier documents. I'm not as familiar with the changes, but one other thing, Jim, and maybe you addressed it. So one of the concerns, it sounds like, is that the developer didn't own that land. It was the Eastmark Community Alliance. And then you said something about the Eastmark Community Alliance actually signed I'm going to use non-legal terms, a waiver or acknowledgement that they were authorized to go into that. So is the developer and the ECA the same entity? Are they different entities?
Chair, Board Member Summers, I'll go backwards on your questions. They're separate entities.
Okay.
The document that the HOA signed is a consent and assumption of obligations. So they did sign onto the Fifth Amendment to consent to assuming all the obligations under the Fifth Amendment, which are, largely are the easement obligations. So, and that's spelled out within that document.
And was the developer, at the time that this was done, was the developer the majority stakeholder in the ECA, or?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. And then you had
Yes, Councilman Summers, the ECA is declarant controlled.
Okay, and did you have a meeting to vote on this agreement at the ECA?
I don't know that it was a specific meeting, but it was a unanimous consent, which is the document that.
A unanimous consent.
Yeah.
So basically the developer was the majority stakeholder in the ECA and therefore could enter into the agreement.
Correct.
And what happens if we find out that if the auditor finds out that that's somehow not the case? Does this unwrap the fifth agreement, or you said we're indemnified then?
So we have multiple belts and suspenders. We have representation, warranty, and indemnity from the developer that they have the authority. We have both the consent and assumption that the HOA signed that they gave to us. We also have a legal opinion from a separate law firm saying that it was authorized.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just going to shut myself down now because there's so much, seems to be so much nuance to it, and maybe going through the audit and having some other meetings we'll settle this down. There's a constituency that is concerned about what they felt was a private use in the golf course or the disc golf course and the skate park, and then to have that suddenly end up in the city's hands is unsettling. And I think this is the pushback we're getting here. That said, I do appreciate the amenities of this park are tremendous. I think this is one of the best amenitized parks in all the cities. I'm pretty proud of it. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to the upcoming audit to kind of thresh out some of these unanswered questions that I have. So, thank you.
One added piece of information for your benefit, Councilman, is the community also, any resident who purchases a home within the community is provided with a master disclosure statement that basically lays out all the high-level stuff in the community. One of those things being the various amenities, and the disc golf and skate park have always been listed in that as public amenities as well, and open to the public. So,
okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Summers. Okay, just to remind everyone, we're on agenda item 4A, and I'll just add that I think I appreciate Ms. Miller phoning in and sending us blue cards as well. And I think the points that the questions she asked with regard to the ownership of the property and whether or not the entities that were involved had the legal authority to do what they were doing were asked in good faith and were good questions. And I appreciate Mr. Smith addressing those. And it sounds like this has all been documented in such a way that it allows us to go forward legally. The questions with regard to the city of Mesa's role in the skate park and the disc park, I think that we kind of litigated those back to during this discussion of the Fifth Amendment. And I'll just join. I'm thrilled that we have a skate park and that we have a disc park that are really high quality and that are public amenities. So And I don't think that lessens their value to people who live in or are part of the HOA either. So I'm comfortable proceeding with this. Are there any other questions or discussions? Is there a motion to approve this item? Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Is there a second? Okay, thank you. There's been a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. 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 Are there any opposed?
Mayor?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I had to step out for a minute for a family emergency, but I'd like to abstain from the vote since I missed part of the discussion. I'm sorry.
Do we have a quorum if,
Mayor and council, so, and while we are a separate board for this, the charter generally says unless you have a conflict, you can't abstain. And so if you'd like to ask some questions before you vote, why don't we go back through the discussion?
all right. So we have a motion, has there been a motion made? There's been a second made. I've called the question.
Do we have a majority? Is everybody on board? Okay, yes.
Okay.
On all the council, I trust the judgment of my other council members, and I will vote yes on
Let me do this backwards. Is there anyone opposed to this motion? All right, anyone all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. That passes unanimously. Is there a motion to adjourn this meeting? Thank you, Mr. Freeman. There's in a second. Thank you, Mr. Summers. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. We are adjourned.